Both of those are two people who are willing to perhaps engage in a little bit of fantasy in order to sort of court their followers and stoke some interest. So it seems unsurprising that they have done that. Elon Musk, of course, is very important in the space race. If he was likely to know something, then he would be probably more informed than maybe the average person, in part just because of his SpaceX endeavors.
Chris Stokel-Walker, thank you so much for joining the Tech Report today.
Thanks for having me.
We've got to start off with this news from the CEO of Alphabet, which is, of course, Google's parent company. He warned that while this AI boom has enormous potential, he said that no company, even the large and stable ones, will be immune to this AI bubble burst if it were to happen. So what do you think he means by that, Chris?
I think that he's just telling the truth and being honest here, which is that we are overexposed in many ways to AI companies because they are driving the stock market at the minute. In other news, Maddie, water is wet. This is kind of the way that we think about these sorts of things. So the magnificent 7 big tech companies, Apple, Google, Microsoft and others among them, many of them ruling the roost, as it were, in the AI race, they account for something like 35% of the entire US stock market at present, which is a historic high. We haven't actually seen that level of concentration within so few companies ever in the history of the traded market. So they are overly reliant on these companies, and that means that they are basically dominating the economy right now. If we look in the last 6 months or so, they have accounted for more than half of the economic growth. And we've talked before on the Tech Report about the fact that if you strip out tech growth in terms of this sort of stuff, then actually US GDP growth was pretty much flat. So Sundar Pichai here, I think, is saying what we all know, which is that we are in some elements of a bubble. He's not the first to say this, nor necessarily the most high profile in the tech world. Sam Altman has been saying the same for around about a month now. I suppose what is the big new thing is that he thinks that all of these companies that are not necessarily AI companies outright will also be exposed in some way. Now, the extent to which that is the case is something that he hasn't necessarily clarified. Obviously, lots of us use the tech companies' products, and more companies are integrating AI into what they do in their practices. So I suppose maybe that is what he's suggesting here. But actually, the argument that these tech bros often make is that even if we do have a bubble, and it's not likely to be a sort of equivalent of the dot-com bubble in the early 2000s around the turn of the millennium, even then we do still have an underlying infrastructure and a useful product that we can still use regardless. So maybe a retrenchment in many ways, and the stock market is certainly spooked right now. We've seen Nvidia's shares dropping as well. But I think that this isn't necessarily the end of the world.
Well, let's get into that. The US stock market fell on Monday, but most notably one of the market's largest tech plays, being Nvidia, was one of them to suffer a decline, which also then significantly weighed on the rest of the overall market. But the chip manufacturer fell 1.8%, but not only just from Monday, Chris, because they've had a tumultuous last few weeks on the stock market. So why do you think it is Nvidia feeling the wrath of this?
Well, they are the ones that are driving the AI revolution that we're seeing right now. They are pretty much the only name in the game when it comes to supplying those GPUs, the computer chips that are powering the AI models that we use day in, day out. If you look at ChatGPT, 800 million of us use it worldwide every single week. They are heavily reliant on Nvidia chips in order to actually both train their models and also to do inference, to actually produce the responses that we ask for. There are other companies that are starting to develop competing chips, but Nvidia truthfully has around about a 30-year head start. They have been focusing on GPUs, those graphical processing units, since the 1990s. They've realized that they are useful for AI since the late 2000s or so, and they have been fine-tuning their products to be really powerful for the current generative AI revolution. So really, I think what is happening here is that the traders, those who are slightly scared about this sort of stuff, including, by the way, some pretty big names. Peter Thiel divested some of his interest in Nvidia. We also saw the trader behind the big short in a previous generation of market trading taking negative positions on both Nvidia and Palantir, another company that is believed to be exposed to the AI revolution. They are basically getting, I think, cold feet about the AI revolution. Now, of course, they are just two people. They are two influential people, but nevertheless, there is a whole market out there. And so Nvidia's drop, if you compare it to the broader gains that they've made, we're talking hundreds of percent gains over several years now. So 1.8% is significant, yes, but I think it is a relatively small scale drop in the grand scheme of things.
Elon Musk has gone viral this week for kind of a bizarre reason, Chris. He was responding on Joe Rogan's podcast about the speculation that an alien mothership was in the solar system. Now, forgive me if I botched this, but it was labeled a 31/Atlas. It was detected entering and leaving the solar system in July. It has now been said that it was just a comet, which Elon Musk said it was. But he said if it were an alien mothership, then he would talk about this publicly. So why do you think people jump to this conclusion that that was what it was as opposed to a comet? And, aliens being present and entering the solar system is one of the biggest conspiracy theories still to date. So I wonder why that is still kind of amongst the science and tech world.
Well, I think that it's because Elon Musk likes to court controversy in many ways. So I don't necessarily believe that Elon Musk believes in aliens, although if you think about it and you talk to many scientists who study astrophysics and interplanetary sort of transportation and things like that, there is likely to be some sort of life on another planet elsewhere. What that life may be, not necessarily the aliens that we imagine from the movies. It could frankly just be a single simple bacteria that survives in some water that is seen on a extraterrestrial planet somewhere. So, the idea that they might kind of invade our solar system, I think, is still very much in the sci-fi movie realm rather than anything to do with reality. But you're talking here about Elon Musk. You are talking about him also appearing on the Joe Rogan podcast. Both of those are two people who are willing to perhaps engage in a little bit of fantasy in order to sort of court their followers and stoke some interest. So it seems unsurprising that they have done that. Elon Musk, of course, is very important in the space race. If he was likely to know something, then he would be probably more informed than maybe the average person, in part just because of his SpaceX endeavors. But yeah, it is notable that pretty much immediately after word started to get around that he said this, Musk relatively quickly clarified that actually he has no evidence for this sort of stuff, and he was basically just hypothesizing that it would be cool in many ways, because Elon Musk is the sort of person that does think that aliens are pretty cool.
Well, speaking of Elon Musk, he's launched this X chat, a new messaging service built into the app X, obviously formerly known as Twitter. It's meant to kind of mirror WhatsApp. You can call, you can audio and video call, you can message, you can even share files. So how has the launch been so far, Chris? And do you see it on path to rival these popular messaging apps?
Easy answer for the first one, Maddie, no. And that is a pretty simple one, in part, I think, because this has been a long time coming. Elon Musk has said that he wanted to integrate chat into X pretty much ever since he bought it. And that was now, 3.5 years ago, if not more, when he started to first launch his bid and obviously took it over in October 2022. So we are now talking 3 full years of ownership. He has said often that he has a long feature list and a timeline for when he wants to integrate those sorts of things. Unfortunately, as with many of his companies, those timelines do slip and some of those features do disappear. So it is good that this has come to fruition in some way, shape or form. I've got access to XChat as well. It's been one of those things that appears in your direct message inbox as a separate sort of server. Nobody that I know does use it, however. And I think that is where we start to see some of the issues. Musk here is trying to create an incursion against what is a pretty long-standing, well-established set of apps. If you're looking at the likes of WhatsApp or iMessage, those are the main competitors I think that Musk is taking aim at here. The reality is they work pretty well. They are incredibly popular. They have user bases in the billions rather than even the hundreds of millions. And so trying, I think, to get into that space and compete against those products is going to be exceptionally difficult. It is notable, I suppose, that he has targeting India in this case. We often look now for where are the next billion users coming to, and if we look more broadly at how tech companies are targeting their initiatives around the world, we have the likes of ChatGPT and other services offering either cut price or free services to Indian consumers because they see that as the next big growth market. Penetration in terms of internet access and digital use is comparatively low compared to elsewhere in the world. And so I think that there is this idea that maybe you can't shake off the habits of a lifetime for maybe those in the West who are more used to using WhatsApp day in, day out. But actually, if you're talking about other countries where internet infrastructure is still on the rise and habits haven't yet necessarily been formed, loyalties created towards certain apps or products or services, then actually, this is a smart play. So if it is likely to succeed, I think there will be maybe two key demographics that Elon Musk is going to get. Number one is his Tesla, SpaceX, and X adherents, people who will use his products regardless of whether or not they actually have utility in their lives or are useful to them because it has Elon Musk's name attached to it and they really do believe in what he is doing. And then you might have the sort of next generation of internet users. So perhaps maybe not hugely popular now, but that's not to say that it couldn't be a sleeping giant in the years or decades to come.
Well, let's get into that kind of focus on India as its own market, Chris, because Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, of course, he said during an event at the India Global Forum in San Francisco, he said that India is poised to become one of OpenAI's most important partners. Now, OpenAI has been fast growing. Some even described it as accelerating. It is the second largest market by user count for OpenAI after the United States. So do you think Sam Altman is planning on making it the largest market given the population size?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look relative in terms of population size, India far outstrips the United States. And if you take out China, which is its own kind of tech bubble because of the Great Firewall and because it has its own vibrant ecosystem of different apps and services that we don't really use at all in the West, then yeah, India becomes the obvious place that you want to grow. As well, it is quickly industrializing, quickly developing in terms of economics and becoming richer by the day. So therefore it makes sense, and actually you want to ingrain those habits early on in order to try and gain market share and then have the ability to maybe trade up those users to turn that into reliable revenue. What is interesting is that obviously OpenAI, as I mentioned earlier, they're going through this interesting phase of effectively offering a try before you buy aspect to their products. And they're not alone, by the way, in this. Perplexity, other products like it are offering cut price access or sometimes even free access to large swathes of the population in countries like India because they believe that if they can get people hooked and addicted or just building a habit to using their apps, then actually that means once they get more ingrained in terms of their use, they can start to say, well, actually, we'd love to charge you a couple of dollars a month or something like that for you to continue to use it. And that suddenly builds at a scale when you're talking about India that other countries can't necessarily compete with. There is a really interesting parallel here, Maddie, which is that actually OpenAI and other companies that are following this path are going down the same route that an app that previously was thought to be dominating the world would have done if not for the unfortunate circumstances of geopolitics, which is TikTok. TikTok, hugely popular in countries like Indonesia and Japan and other Southeast Asian countries because of their proximity to their home base of the parent company, which was ByteDance in China. They initially were hugely popular there, and then they entered the Indian market and became enormously useful there as well, building up several 100 million users in pretty much no time whatsoever. What TikTok struggled with at that time was the reality of the geopolitics, which was they had that link to China. That was deeply uncomfortable for the Indian government, who were in a border skirmish with China at the time. So actually, TikTok ended up being banned alongside many other apps of Chinese origin, and therefore didn't thrive in that world. TikTok has managed to build up its bases elsewhere, but I think probably they do miss those hundreds of millions of users in a way that OpenAI and other Western companies aren't necessarily going to have issues with, because they don't have that cultural, that geopolitical baggage as well. So, it does seem like there are some strategic moves going on here by Sam Altman and other tech executives to look at not just the here and now, but to say, well, what happens 5, 10, 20 years down the line when we need to build our businesses further, when we think that we've entered mature markets and become mature in those markets. And so, it makes a lot of sense that they do try and target India.
In a kind of bizarre story, Chris, July 2020, we saw UK national Joseph James O'Connor. He coordinated a hack of the social media platform Twitter, which is obviously now called X. He compromised the accounts of pretty high-profile individuals such as Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Elon Musk, and a few others. He was sentenced in 2023 to 5 years behind bars, so he's currently still serving. But the update on this story is that the Crown Prosecution Service in the UK has ordered him to repay £4.1 million in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency assets. So, I mean, Chris, this is a pretty wild story that this is happening a few years after he was sentenced.
It is, and it speaks, I think, to the way in which governments around the world and law enforcement that represents those governments are starting to get canny to the use of cryptocurrency by these criminals. This isn't the only case that we've seen where assets have been seized or ordered to be repaid in these sorts of ways. I think that this speaks to the level of investment in terms of time and money, as well as expertise, that law enforcement has put into trying to understand the crypto market. We've also seen, for instance, Chinese criminals who have been arrested and then ordered to forfeit access to their crypto wallets because that is where they have stashed their ill-gotten gains. There are actually a surprising number of countries that hold in effectively escrow some of these crypto assets that they have seized from criminals, and actually building up a huge amount of value as the Bitcoin and other crypto markets have started to grow in terms of their worth. So, this is kind of always the case with cyber criminals in terms of you're playing a cat and mouse game. So for maybe sort of 10, 15 years or so, really, we have seen them using with impunity crypto markets because of their ability to obfuscate the source of their income, and then also to try and launder that through various, they're called tumblers in the sort of space where actually you can trade your crypto through various wallets, so that it becomes incredibly difficult for a forensic accountant to try and understand where that came from and where it is going. Of course, the one fatal flaw with crypto here in terms of this is that it does always have this distributed regular ledger of transactions. So if you take the time and you put in the investment to actually be able to understand where this stuff is going, you can identify a specific wallet where it has come from and actually be able to use that to try and then seize those assets and put them to a better purpose.
Chris, just finally, electric vehicle sales in South America are rapidly growing despite Tesla actually not having much of a presence there. So Chinese EV makers like BYD and Geely and GWM are dominating the market share there. I think this is something we've spoken about before, about other companies really dominating the EV market. So just for some stats, in Chile, EVs reached about 10.6% in September, a 10% growth. I mean, in Brazil, EV shares was around 9.4% for new car sales in August. In Uruguay, EVs accounted for about 28% of the new cars in the third quarter. So what do you think that tells us in regards to Tesla's competition? Because I think you and I have spoken about how BYD, for instance, was really dominating the UK EV market.
Yeah, I mean, basically it tells us that there is a bifurcation going on, a real splitting of this market, and plenty of competition for Elon Musk and his firms, which I think is particularly troubling for them, because actually what is happening is not just in terms of around the world, where we are starting to see cheap Chinese EVs flooding the market, and that is something that Elon Musk really petitioned Donald Trump in terms of his first few months before they fell out, to try and counteract by import levies and things like that, to prevent those Chinese cars coming into the United States and really quashing any ability for Tesla to compete, because Elon Musk charges a premium price for what he sees as a premium product, but with China, they have the scale, the ability to be able to produce these cars incredibly cheaply. They are able to do so in part also because of the powertrain, the engine and the batteries that go into driving these vehicles. Literally, they are often concentrated within China, including the rare earths that are required, so they don't have to travel halfway around the world, which does add significantly to the cost of those vehicles. But I think that it is interesting that this is not just happening around the world in terms of South America and elsewhere, but also is happening in China. We're starting to see really interventionist policies by the Chinese government tackling specific issues that Tesla has made their own. So, safety concerns around the ability of the doors to actually open in the event of an accident, that targeted very specifically Tesla, because they had a unique sort of design that they had for door handles that was not seen as safe by Chinese authorities. Same thing they're saying now with the speed at which you reach 60 miles an hour, 100 kilometers an hour. Tesla has made that a real selling point of their vehicles, but actually we've seen recently Chinese government intervention to say, well, we think that there should be a minimum speed that you can get to that. So a minimum time period at which you can reach that speed in order to make it a little bit safer on the road as well. But what we're seeing also is, I suppose, a rollout of key infrastructure in these countries, across South America, where this was always likely to come, the EV revolution, but it does take some time to build out the charging infrastructure, all of those sorts of things that encourage drivers to take the jump, as it were, to move to an electric vehicle rather than an internal combustion engine, because we know that there are petrol stations dotted around countries on the side of most popular roads, but actually for a while there hasn't necessarily been the same charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. And range anxiety, that fear of running out of battery and not being able to recharge, is a really significant issue for EVs. It's one that I think is now being solved in South America, looks like it's going to be solved elsewhere in the world, and so I think we'll start to see the share of EVs as the total market growing and growing in the years to come.
Chris Stokel-Walker, thank you for joining the Tech Report.
Thank you.